Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Emma Norrish and I'm Chair of the Waipapa Papanui Innis Central Community Board. Thank you for the opportunity to come along and speak to our submission today. I'll take the submission as read and we'll just briefly highlight a few of the main points. However, first I would like to give you a quick rundown on our community board area, as I am aware that a number of you may not be familiar with our area and our demographics. Our board covers a very diverse area of the city, from the fringes of the urban area out in Marshland, through the built-up suburban areas of Redwood, Papanui, Maraho and Shirley, to the city fringe areas of St Albans, Richmond, part of Linwood and Phillipstown, right into the central city itself. Our board area has a population of just over 70,000 people, a median age of 34.9 years, and a median personal income of 33,500.
Emma, can I just hold?
Yes.
Can we get the city map up and we can actually home in on your
sure,
your area? So
I can drive it there. Okay.
Just bring your
Coming south. Right. So you can see my pointer, can't you?
Yes, yes.
So we do not take in Belfast or Northwood.
Yes.
We come up the top of Redwood here. We follow the river along here.
Yes.
Down Marshland Road.
Yes.
We come around this way, take in Maraho.
Yes.
Come around here. We take in Shirley, right through these inner city suburbs.
Yes.
On the western side, we come right out here to Waimakariri Road.
Yes.
And we basically come through Blythe Road, down
Road.
here to the Hegwood Park.
Yes.
And the central city, obviously. And then on the eastern side, we kind of come along the river here, down Linwood Ave to Aldwins Road.
Yes.
And right down Aldwins to Brougham. And we take in part of like the very kind of eastern side of Sydenham.
Yep. Thank you. That's great.
29% of our residents were born overseas. Of the 28,500 occupied private dwellings in our area, 49% of them are rented, and we also have large areas of social housing throughout our board area. The draft spatial plan is of particular importance to our board, as we cover areas which are particularly mentioned in the plan as being targeted for growth, such as the central city and Papanui, and to a lesser extent, Shirley and Linwood. We also have a vested interest in how the towns to the north of the city develop, as our residents deal with the thousands of commuters coming through our communities each day. As you'll see from our submission, we are all for allowing growth in appropriate places, and we support the move to focus intensification on existing significant urban centres. Our board supports the 15 or 20-minute city concept, where locals can access their basic needs, shops, workplaces, schools, parks, within 15 minutes through walking, biking, or using public transport. We are pleased to see in the draft plan some good discussion around connected neighbourhoods and the need to create vibrant communities with access to services. In our board area, we have communities which have already experienced huge intensification since the earthquakes, such as St Albans, Richmond, Linwood, and Phillipstown. This growth has changed these communities, some say for the better, others say for the worse. But one thing that has become clear is that the provision of necessary infrastructure must go hand in hand with the development. Intensification and growth without improving community infrastructure, such as community facilities, sport and recreation facilities, green space, and other amenities, as well as the necessary roading, public transport, and three waters infrastructure, does not lead to prosperous, happy communities. We are pleased to see that the spatial plan recognises the importance of managing the risks of natural hazards and climate change, and looks to focus growth in areas free from these risks. We have communities in our board area which are prone to flooding and have learned the importance of investing in infrastructure to mitigate this. Incentivising development and growth away from these areas will protect those people and their communities while saving ratepayers' dollars in the long run. Transport and traffic are one of the biggest issues we deal with as a community board. One of the priorities in our 2023 to 2025 community board plan is a connected transport network in our area, and ensuring that community safety is at the forefront of all transport recommendations and decisions we make. This part of our plan also focuses on supporting active transport initiatives that promote walking, cycling, and using public transport. We therefore support the draft spatial plan's proposal to focus future development and investment around transport corridors and to significantly improve public transport connections between key centres. Our board believes a huge opportunity was missed after the earthquakes to link the existing rail network up with the central city, but still believe that utilising the existing tracks from the growing districts of Waimakariri and Selwyn into the city should be considered. With mass rapid transport requiring retrospective installation on roads, some of which are already congested and narrow, together with the significant cost and timeframes attached, we believe it would be remiss to not include existing rail as a discussion point at this time in such a key document as this. If mass rapid transit is to be the way forward for Greater Christchurch, we would like to see it extended past Belfast through to Kaipoi and onto Rangiora. Finally, I would like to commend the draft plan on its desire to enhance and expand the network of green spaces in Greater Christchurch. This is something else we have prioritised in our community board plan, and we note the importance of green spaces and trees to our residents and the many benefits they provide for our environment. Thank you again for the opportunity to present you today on what is an impressive, well thought out and aspirational document. Our board appreciates the work that has gone in to get it to this point, and we look forward to seeing the opportunities presented in it come to fruition and ultimately benefit everyone in the Greater Christchurch region. Thanks.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you for that summary. Excellent submission. I think all of the community boards that have made submissions is such a valuable input to our decision making, and having the chance to talk to you and ask questions is good. I do have a couple of questions that I would like to bring up, Matt, too, if we could, please, just so we've got a graphic. So maybe just take it out so we can see the whole map, because I want to ask questions. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Emma? Emma, we've had a lot of submissions from citizens and experts suggesting that the current railway lines, particularly servicing Rangiora North and Wollaston to the south, should be identified in the spatial plan as potential people moving facilities infrastructure. Currently, that's not identified or proposed in the plan, but your board supports that option being left open. Is that
absolutely? Yes.
Could you just have a look at maybe Hornby for a start? I'll start not the area, but there is an MRT route proposed out to Hornby in two stages, firstly to Riccarton and then to Hornby. Can you see that?
Yep.
And there is a railway line coming through Hornby as well.
Yes.
So would you suggest that the spatial plan should I leave open or identify the possibility that people coming from Wollaston or south could come into the MTR and do an interchange off the rail and onto the MTR at that point?
Oh, at Hornby?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, our view is that it makes sense to use the infrastructure that is there, which is the existing tracks.
Yes. Okay.
And yeah, if it's worthy of a discussion at least.
Yes.
And that's why we're disappointed it hasn't been included in this at all.
And in the north, you see Belfast there. And even at Papanui, where the first stage goes, the railway line goes close to those MRT hubs, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yes. And you would, in the Papanui ones, right in your heart of your community board?
Yep. And
could you envisage a rail connection there where people could come on rail and then hop onto the MTR from either Hornby or either Belfast or Papanui?
Yeah. I mean, there's the old Papanui railway station still there. It's a 5-minute walk from there to the existing bus super stop outside Northlands, links with a large high school, Northlands Mall. It's the ideal spot.
Okay. No, that's really, really helpful, because you know the geography much better than I, but if that connectivity between the heavy rail and those key station nodes for the NTR at Hornby, probably Riccarton, Papanui and Belfast, if those were practical, not too far away, that's the opportunity the board would like to see.
Yes,
flagged,
yes.
at least.
I can't really speak to the Riccarton and Hornby ones. I'm not exactly sure, but I know in Belfast and Papanui, the tracks do go right by those centres.
Okay, thank you. Victoria.
Oh, I just wanted to note, please, that I'm on this community board and that I logged this as an interest. It's not been declared a conflict, but I didn't have a hand in on the submission at all. But I'm very familiar with what he was talking about.
That's right. So we're running a register of interest, and Victoria's flagged the fact that she's a member of the board, and I'm happy that for the purpose of our spatial planning, that's not a material issue for her as a conflict. So pleased to have her listening in. Any other questions? I'm sure Grant. Yes, there you go.
It's more in response to, I think, so much for your submission. You've got lots of things you've covered, and it's good to hear your support. We have had some submitters concerned that in the way they've interpreted what the plan was about, that somehow there was going to be land purchase and demolition along the route. Have you had any feedback on that
No,
feeling in the community?
No, I haven't heard any of that, and we haven't had any of it brought to our board either.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Victoria.
I wonder if you could just touch on the 15-minute cities. We've also had a number of submitters coming who have expressed concern about that construct, is what they call it. And I note that you specifically mentioned it as supporting it. I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit in terms of how you see it working in this area.
It's just taking away that reliance on needing cars and roads to get to where people need to go in their everyday lives. Of course, there will always be trips that you do need to make in a car, but it would be ideal to have all those things within that, with even if it's walking 5 minutes to a bus stop to catch the bus into the centre of town, it's that only needing that 5-minute walk to get there. And studies have proven that it is harder to retrofit into cities such as ours that are sort of urban sprawl. But I think especially centred around those key significant urban centres, it makes sense for people to have everything that they need in their day-to-day lives right there and easily accessible.
And the supplementary to that, if I can share, is can you share with us what the board's views were in relation to PC14, intensification along the main corridor routes?
We're generally supportive of it. We would rather see areas such as Papanui built up rather than further urban sprawl out into our wider areas of our city.
Thank you. While this map is up here, I have an additional question for the officer team, and it's around the blue lines, which are the core public transport routes. I'd like to understand better why the public transport routes, core routes to the east, aren't connected. They just stop and there's some broad arrows. There's a lot of existing housing and communities in the east, including Sumner, New Brighton, Redcliffs, and others to the north east as well. When you come back to us, can you just explain why it's not connected to those facilities or those current parts of the city, and why we're just sort of showing broad arrows? I've been out there myself, and there's sort of significant communities already there. I know there's hazard issues in those locations, particularly near the coast, but yeah, just some clarification on why it's just arrows and nothing specific would be very helpful. Thank you. That's a bit off the track, but it's a question I was went to ask for before lunch when I submit a raise that as well. Are there any more questions for Emma? No, thank you. Thank you so much for coming, Emma. Callum.
I'm next, am I?
Is Callum?
Oh, Helen.
Oh, this is Helen. There's no Callum.
Is he on the phone?
Okay, so we've jumped Helen forward. That's great. Come forward. Come forward, please, Helen.
Oh, is it me?
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm getting confused between Callum and Helen. Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity. We almost didn't have it because we weren't actually aware that this was happening. And it was because our councillor, Mark Peters, went to a briefing, and fortunately he came back and said, here's a hard copy, that our board was able to actually participate. So that's the problem for City Council. But there's a genuine lack of awareness of this.
Yeah, you have made a submission now, haven't you?
Yes, we have, yes.
Right.
So it was done with, yes. So so my name is Helen Broughton. I'm chairperson of the Horsville Hornby Riccarton Community Board. I've been on local government since 1995 and served 13 years as a councillor, where I was on all the planning committees, and I was one of the ones who was involved in the very early days with the urban development strategy, which has now become, I believe, this committee. I'm trained as an RMA commissioner, so I do go on hearings and hear concerns. There's two items you haven't received, but I've just tabled. One item has come through to you in electronic form from Mike Blackburn. I'll report on it briefly. And then I've got, you've got a hard copy in front of you from a landscape architect, which I will also touch on. The first, I'm probably going to go through it as it comes. 2.1, we strongly believe.
Helen, can I stop? Before you start,
yes,
can we do what we did before, Josephine, and just show me the general area of Helen's community board?
I would struggle with this.
No, but I think
if someone wants to come and help me
and can help us, I think, hopefully. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of the fastest growing wards, and it's got Riccarton intensification, Horsville new subdivisions, and Hornby growing subdivisions with industry.
Okay.
So
we can see Riccarton there.
Yes. So if we start here and go up, sort of up there, including the University of Canterbury.
Yes.
Swinging across to Broomfield, then out further, coming into Hornby.
Yes.
Going through the Hornby, round the Hornby Mall.
So we're going south.
And going north, in fact, to Templeton. Okay. So we've got an outreach suburb out there.
South to Templeton, is it? Yes.
And then swinging across Marshes Road.
Yes.
And it's swinging through an urban edge, if you like.
Yes.
Through to Horsville, which is growing subdivisions.
Yes, I've been
and
there.
Planned subdivisions too.
Yes.
I was involved in the 2009 Southwest Area Plan. So all this was planned subdivisions in fact, Horsville.
Okay, so you got a big swing around the west, north and south. Yes.
Yes, so it's yes, it's basically moving out from Deans Avenue
Yes.
out to Hornby, Templeton, and Hallsville,
Gotcha.
including Riccarton and University.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. First of all, 2.1, our board believes you need to look at a map of for fast transport going to Rolleston and Rangiora. And I think you've heard that from other people. 2.2, we're surprised that there was no mass transit system to the east. And I've said in the submission that either it will become a tranquil, lovely place, or in fact the backwater. So what I think you need, and in Plan Change 14, which we're heavily involved in, they've now come in the 42A report with extra shopping, not extra shopping centres, higher shopping centres in the east. So you might like to look at that, what's come through in a 42A report from council. So you might want to also have a look at, do you want to have mass transit out to other areas like Shirley and Linwood? 2.3, and this is Mike Blackburn's evidence. He did this report in January 2023. He's a person who does property surveying and analysis. And in this report, it says that Selwyn and Waimakariri are growing. Selwyn's growing at 5%, Waimakariri at 2%, and Christchurch isn't growing. If anything, it's a slight decline. 2.4, we've questioned, can you project out 60 years? The Plan Change 14 is going out to 2050. You seem to be tasked with a longer time period. I'm not sure why, but there's questions. I've got an ex-academic mathematician husband who's retired, but he says you can't model, he even doubts you can model out to 2050. So going out an extra 30 years is probably very, very hard to do, though obviously with mass transit you'd have really to know what you're doing. Our 2.5, our major concern is 2.5. You are projecting a different pattern of households between Riccarton and Papanui. This is the first time this has been done, and it's not in Plan Change 14. So I don't know if it's an error or it's something that you intended, but on page 36, I'll just get 36, it shows that Riccarton has between 100 and 150 households per hectare, and Papanui has 70 to 100 households per hectare. So I ask that we ask as a board that you treat them in a similar way. That's what's happening in Plan Change 14. There doesn't seem any reason, and you haven't explained any reason for making them different. And the current rate of an intensification in medium density areas is 77 households per hectare. Now, I've come across this from hearings panels, and the rate projected when the plan was published was it would be 30 households per hectare in medium density. So it's flying well above that, even with current medium density requirements. So if you bring in what I'm suggesting, it may go higher anyway, and nothing much can be done about it. So you project what you think is going to happen, but in theory, it goes higher. So we're really asking that there's not a differentiation between Papanui and Riccarton, or if there is, you explain it very, very carefully, because this is the issue we're very concerned about. Suddenly, from left field, there's a higher density than Papanui. 2.8, the drawings. You've got a hard copy in front of you. Now, in your book and in Plan Change 14, there's the sort of glowing picture of high density. Can I just check with staff? They have got the hard copy in good. So that's what's been done by a landscape architect working for council on Plan Change 14. And it shows in the first diagram medium density, which isn't overly attractive. And then it shows in the bottom drawing high density, which looks particularly appalling. And the reason is there's no setback from the street, or if it's a setback, it's 1.5 metres. So you're going to have these huge buildings on either side of the street causing wind tunnels. And it's certainly not what the public of Christchurch, or can I talk the public of my area, want. For Plan Change 14, all the Riccarton residents associations have strongly objected. Hornby, Greater Hornby Association is particularly not concerned. And the only association that is milder on it is Hallsville. And I probably think they don't quite realise what could happen. But so the strong opposition, particularly in Hornby and Riccarton, and we ask you to tailor back any requirements that you have to make sure it's reasonably human and attractive. 2.9, there seems to be an issue, and I've sometimes struck this at council, where they say, well, you have intensification, but then you'll ruin a green belt. Now, our board's view very strongly is that you can keep the green belt. We don't want to intrude on that. We're getting intensification anyway, even under the current rules, and so they can both be done together. What has happened is that Leanne Dalzell wrote a letter to Minister Parker in 2019 saying there's no land scarcity in Christchurch. So we basically don't have a land scarcity problem at this point. Leanne has written to Minister Parker about that. It's been ignored, but basically we can do both. Have intensification at a reasonable level and a green belt. It doesn't have to be either or. 2.18, medium density is not a success. I live in Rata Street, which is suburban density. It is potentially going to high density. But the other side of Riccarton Road, so on one side of Riccarton Road and the other, has been medium density for 25 years. And it's not attractive. It's getting more and more built up. Trees are being knocked down. There's no space between the footpath and the actual unit. And the people who live in that accommodation are often transient, young people, students, or people who recently immigrated. It doesn't become a permanent place for anybody. And in terms of sustainable choices on 2.21, even the students in those flats say that they use the car. So I don't quite know how you get through that, but at present, medium density is still, people are still using cars. They park on the grass berms. You can't pick up the waste easily. There's general clutter on the streets, and it's not attractive. And I'd ask you to go and have a wander around. And that's the area between the railway line on Riccarton Road and Matapo Street, all the way to Glenham Road. Highly intensified, 2 stories only, sometimes 3, but mainly 2, and it's just not attractive. Now, if I could talk about my experience of high density in Shanghai, I've got a son who's been there for 15 years. He's just moved to Singapore. He's been in a high-rise building in central Shanghai, but it was a gatekeeper community. You had to pass a test going in, or had a card like this going in, and they had a garden. Now, what's going to happen here is our planning does not allow for a high-rise development. And we're now talking about 10 stories in Riccarton. If the plan change 14 happens, you've got no ability in planning to create a garden around these high-rise places. You can't do it. So you're going to get the English model where they just stand up, they look barren, they're close to railway lines, they look unpleasant, and they create social problems for the future. Well, they have in Britain, and I can't see why it would change here. So you need to, if you're going to go to high rise, I don't know how you do it, because we've each got our district plans, but you certainly have to have what Shanghai has, which is an area downstairs where the people can go and sit in the garden. And I just think we're actually heading for something unpleasant if we don't keep it either lowish density, maybe medium, or we somehow make sure there's green space. So can I say that many residents are concerned, particularly in I can only talk for the ward I live in, or the board I'm from. They're not aware of the spatial plan, and they're hardly even aware of the independent hearings panel. I've been down there, and I've been down there 3 times, and every time I've been down, there's experts. Now, this coming week, it's residential, and there'll be a lot of groups down there, but for 4 weeks or so, the panel has just heard from experts. They've heard from me too, but to try and get some balance, if you like. But highly concerned. But can I say we do support your opportunity 1, your opportunity 2, opportunity 3, and opportunity 5. So we've just got some questions, and I've got a couple of questions, if I can.
I think we're the ones that ask
You're
questions.
the ones, because I haven't been able to get these questions answered. But anyway,
Okay,
go.
we'll see if there's any questions from the panel for you. You've been very thorough. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Any questions? Grant.
I was going to say, so it sounds to me like you're not quite getting the information that you would like, and that the dialogue between council and community boards is not quite as, or even the Greater Christchurch Partnership, it's not giving you sufficient information to help you with your visioning of what's perhaps intended.
No, and Mark Peters, I can use him. He's said I've been to a briefing and I've got this book. so I guess maybe he's missed. I don't know, but maybe so there seems to be a gap between where the spatial plan is going with councillors, and then even more so with in fact boards, because I only got it by chance. And if I hadn't picked it up, it probably wouldn't have been a submission if I hadn't got this by chance, basically.
One of the key things that came out of our Greater Christchurch 2050 engagement with the community in 2020, 2021, in the top 5, in fact, it might have been top 1, was green spaces and lots of trees flowing through our communities. So what you were saying about what's happening in Riccarton, for example, there's a bit of a lack of awareness or a lack of planning provision to ensure that those green spaces are adequate and generous around the high-rise buildings. Is that what your community wants to see?
Yes. So I guess it has to be done through a district plan, doesn't it? Yeah. But it's quite, and the other thing I'll just point out, which is really odd, and we've come across it as the board, there was an old house taken down on Clyde Road, and it had some rather scrappy trees. So it wasn't a problem that the house went or the trees went. But what was surprising is that the roadside reserve trees went too. Those are the trees on the road. And we went to our board to have it approved. And when we sort of hesitated, so, do they need to take away these roadside trees? The answer was yes, you have in fact no option. And you can see it from a developer's perspective. He's got a section. He wants to build how he or she wants to build. And so they put trees in place, but they're very puny. So, I mean, that's a district plan issue, like saying you must have 10-year-old trees or something like that. But it takes away trees. Yes.
Helen, I'm afraid we have run out of time. Was there a burning question you wanted to ask us?
Yes. Look, I've been told I don't even know how you fit into the plan change 14.
Okay.
And I don't quite know. I mean, I've been told you're an aspirational plan by a staff member, but I'm not sure that you are.
The spatial plan includes the future development strategy for the Greater Christchurch urban area, which is a requirement of the MPS urban development. So it sits above the other plans, and all new plans must have regard to the spatial plan.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's clarified that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Callum is here now. We'll have you, please. Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank
Helen.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologise to the committee for my lateness.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, so I'm here to speak on behalf of the Waihoto Spraid and Cashmere Heathcote Community Board to our submission that you'll have received in writing. I'm not going to go through, all of the detail that we've got written down, but I wanted to sort of highlight a couple of the key points that are important for our board, and then make myself available obviously for questions.
Before you do that, can you go onto the screen?
Oh, yep.
And just show us your community board area.
Sure.
Just in a map way, if you could scroll around and home us in.
So our community board area is quite large. It stretches from sort of the Hillmorton area in the west over to Sumner in the east. Okay. And north-south, it approaches Morehouse Ave, doesn't quite reach Morehouse Ave, and then it goes up to the top of the hills.
Yes.
So it's the kind of south section of the city.
Okay.
Yep.
But it doesn't include New Brighton. That's another.
No, that's coastal, I think.
Definitely Redcliffs, Ferrymead, Sumner.
Yep. All of those sort of suburbs south of the estuary.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Cool. Yeah. So at a high level, we're really excited about the overall vision and direction of the spatial plan. And we're really sort of, it's great to see all branches of local government and Canterbury working together for the best outcome for our city. So we're really excited and positive, and I want to sort of touch on a few of the kind of asterisks as we have with that being said. So one thing that our board has concerns about is what we sort of consider to be a donut around the central city of brownfields development, which is sort of intensification, I should say, which is happening in a relatively unplanned way. We yeah, there's a lack of focus on those kind of inner suburban areas in the draft spatial plan that we can see. And when I say uncoordinated, what I mean is there's obviously provision for intensification happening in those areas, and that's great. We need more housing. But we're not really seeing a commensurate investment in sort of infrastructure and amenity in that kind of donut around the central city, suburbs like Spraydon and Sydenham in our board area. And what that means, that has negative impacts for us. We're seeing large areas of our suburb being asphalted for car parking in new development areas, reduced green space, huge pressure on community facilities, libraries, pools, etc. But in particular, that what's relevant, I guess, to this submission is massive impacts on traffic congestion. And so while we're excited for the idea of light rail or MRT bus routes, we believe that the quickest wins that will be a step towards that goal are to be found in our already dense communities. The first step towards MRT is a true turn up and go bus network servicing Christchurch's inner suburbs, which is easily accessible by walking and cycling. I mean, just looking at it from a mathematical point of view, dense communities simply have a far greater number of both local users and destinations for out of town users. The best way to set up mass rapid transit for success is to embed it in an already highly functional public transport network within the city, one that's integrated into our collector roads, our neighbourhood streets and cycleways, running past the driveways of homes and businesses. A turn up and go local public transport network will support an MRT functionally, and it will also set up the culture shift that's necessary, that necessarily precedes large scale mode shift. I want to talk a bit about, so that's kind of a high level of that sort of, that donut around the central city there.
Can I just get from you what you mean by turn up and go?
Yep. So if I'm a person living in Hoonhay and I want to get to work, the difference between what we've got at the moment and a turn up and go system is one where I have to really plan the time that I'm going to walk out the door of my house in order to know that I'm going to get the bus that comes past every 40 minutes in order to get to work. Whereas a turn up and go system, a person just has to walk out the door and they know that when they arrive at that bus stop, that within a short period of time, there'll be a bus that's arriving for them. They don't have to memorize the schedule and spend a lot of time waiting at bus stops.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've heard about programs in Timaru, for example, where there are buses, small buses going around picking people up like a sort of a big Uber.
Yeah.
That's not what you're talking about. Turn up and go is more regular service.
No, that's right. Yeah. So it's just really regular servicing of existing PT routes. Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to talk a bit about Sydenham in particular. So Sydenham, which is the area on that map that's sort of just south of Morehouse Ave, is a rapidly growing area with immense potential for residential and commercial development. It's in close proximity to the CBD. It's an attractive location both for residents and businesses. Due to the current oversupply of light industrial land in Christchurch, there is likely to be a long-term shift towards residential and other commercial uses for Sydenham. Sydenham is well suited for mode shift oriented development, given its proximity to the CBD, and it's got huge potential for better public transport and active modes. So we believe that this area offers opportunity for lots of affordable housing, given the underlying land values and potential housing typologies ranging from apartments to terraced housing that exists there already. And we think that Sydenham should be considered as a critical urban development opportunity, potentially on par with other designated areas such as Eastern Christchurch. So that's...
Callum, we heard yesterday about SOMO, south of Morehouse.
Yep.
Is that the general area we're talking about?
That's I'm going to use that now to describe the area I'm talking about, SOMO. Yep. Cool, thank you. Yeah, haven't heard that before, but that's what I'm talking about, essentially. Yep. And I guess just at a high level, we as I've said, we really think that prioritising high quality mass rapid transit is really important. The key things is that it needs to be time competitive with car travel. And as I've said, in order to succeed, it needs to be well integrated into the community, active transport networks, PT networks, etc. And this wouldn't only improve access to mass rapid transit stations, the active transport side of things, it would also support healthy, eco-friendly transportation options. We're excited that this also does present potentially in the future an opportunity for further expansions to an MRT route that's currently outlined in the spatial plan. And we're looking forward to further stages of design and analysis, and we think that will turn up lots of opportunities for easy wins like the ones that I've outlined in Sydenham. We believe in the vision. We think that doing local public transport and active transport even better will be crucial for that vision to succeed. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Great, thank you, Callum, and really excellent submission. Had a good read through it and had a bit of a look around some of the parts of Christchurch. I'm from Hawke's Bay, so it's all reasonably I know it generally, but the submissions really hone me in on those issues. So thank you. We'll see if there's any questions from the panel. Okay. Any other questions? No, thank you so much, Callum. It's really appreciated.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Yes. All right. So we're moving now to Gordon. Malcolm, are you here, Gordon? Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for hearing me today. My slideshow the video here doesn't seem to be correct at the moment, so
You want to start that now?
can you start that again, or you're actually a little bit forward there? That's it, thank you. My concerns about your spatial plan, it actually looks very, very much like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know where you guys have got your plan from, if it's come internationally or you guys have actually formed that plan in Christchurch, but a little bit of a concern there that it's actually not a native thing to Christchurch.
Their paddy fields look lush and green, but in reality, these farmers are struggling. On May 6 last year, they were forced to go
I'll just
organic
pause that for a
overnight.
second. It's jumping
Their
ahead of me.
production
Okay, so Sri Lanka, they've experimented with smart cities and fully removed nitrogen fertilizer from their carbon footprint. Sri Lanka, they followed the advice of the World Economic Forum and shifted to all organic farming a few years back. Let's see how that worked out for the Sri Lankan people.
has plummeted since.
I'm very sad that poor people are facing huge problems now.
Kumara Megastana lost his job as a construction worker after prices of cement skyrocketed. All he and his family have is a few paddy fields to feed themselves. By buying expensive fertilizer on the black market, he hopes to increase production.
I'm working so hard, but it feels as if it is all for nothing. The government gave us organic fertilizer, but it's not good. With good fertilizer, we got a lot of rice, but now it's just a fraction. Before I bought good fertilizer, my harvest went down with 50%.
6 months after their dramatic decision, the government lifted the ban. By then, the country was already in its worst economic crisis since its independence 70 years ago.
The green activists may not like.
Okay, so councils that take on too much debt will go bankrupt. The ratepayer will be holding the can with unbearable rate increases. You've got some UK examples there. I'll just, sorry, I've just jumped up. This is not going as well as I planned with my little show here, but I'll basically just let this video play and then we'll carry on into this part here.
Thank you.
Do you think that means that maybe the tide is turning for the appetite of who to listen to?
Well, I think the tide is turning because, as my friend Doomberg used to say, in the battle between physics and platitudes, physics is undefeated. And I think this is a little bit what we see now as well. Reality is reasserting itself. Now, I would argue that particularly in the West, we have been so rich in the past that we could afford to do lots of stupid things, but we are now not as rich as we were. So the stupid things come with a significantly higher price tag, and people start to feel this. So the big problem, of course, is that we have a political class and a media class that does not know how agriculture works. They don't know how the commodity sector works. They don't know how the energy sector works. This is why we have all these weird proposals that, that organic farming is better than modern industrialized farming. They tried this in Sri Lanka. I'm sure that most of your listeners and viewers know what happened in Sri Lanka, right? The country that decided to do only organic farming, and they turned from a food exporter to a food importer. And of course, then they had riots and the government got overthrown. Now we make the same argument in the energy sector. We say, oh, nuclear, right? Oh, gas, oh, coal, it's all bad. It's all going to be wind and solar. No, it's not going to work, right? They say we're going to have the oil-free economy. Just to give you a little glimpse into this, 6,000 different products that we use every day are made from crude oil. And only a small fraction of it is used for the production of electricity, about 3%. But right, renewables only make electricity, so they will never replace crude oil. But we are told, we are fed all these stories that just around the corner is this green utopia with these green jobs and green technology. None of this is going to happen. We have been promised this transition for 30 years. The German taxpayer has subsidized the renewables revolution, if you want to call it, with 320 billion euros. And now they have energy poverty. So this is, I think, where the shift is going to come, because politicians start to realize that this is not working. So they have two choices, right? Either they can continue this path and hoping that the miracle is materialized at one point. Don't think that's going to happen, right? They will then be voted out of office and replaced by other parties. And the second one is that gradually some parties, some political leaders will realize that you cannot defeat reality and adopt the programs accordingly. Unfortunately, at the moment, whether it's Joe Biden or Rishi Sunak or Olaf Scholz, I see no politician in the West, same in Australia, right, or Justin Trudeau in Canada. I see no politician who is 100% willing to realign themselves with reality. They do it gradually, right? Canada is now coming out for nuclear. There is, in Great Britain, there is a slight movement. Maybe we should do a little bit of oil and gas exploration, but it's very, very slow. And I don't think it's going to happen fast enough to avoid the coming crisis.
I don't know if you guys are aware, but currently in the UK, there are about probably 14 or 15 councils that are filing for bankruptcy. And a lot of the time they're taking on massive debt levels. So it's a major, major concern. So from what we've seen, and I've looked at this very, very carefully over a long period of time, attempts at reducing CO2 cause poverty. Oh, the old thing's gone again, sorry. I'll just carry on with it, sorry. Okay, so we've had our smart cities over in, I'll just try and bring that back up, sorry. Forward that, won't be a moment. Not having much luck with your computer here, eh? Here we go. Okay, you're actually missing part of my presentation. That's okay. Okay, so smart cities, places that have actually gone through, and I call the Greater Spatial Plan, it's basically a smart type city. California, they started implementing this in 2016. That California state now has the highest level of poverty in America. If we look at homelessness, it's probably got the highest rate of child poverty in America. 13.2% of any state over a 3-year average, 2020 to 2022. So we need a circular economy, plastic waste streams, etc. We need sustainable and place-based decisions for each community, not decisions made internationally. The examples I have already shown you cause unnecessary pain and suffering for the population. and don't end well. A net zero emissions future is not only unachievable, as I sit here breathing CO2, it is dangerous to our very future. Christchurch is talking about an 18% rate increase just to service current debt levels. The growing debt of $2 billion highlights the CCC can ill afford a project that I would estimate to be in the billions of dollars. The Christchurch City Council is meant to be the infrastructure managers of our community, and you need to understand that when you spend taxpayer and ratepayer money, it is not a tree that money keeps growing on. How will you fund this project? If you are borrowing money from the LGFA at a low interest rate, this can go up at any time and to any amount. If Auckland or Wellington councils fail to meet their debt obligations, all other councils around the country are liable for Auckland or Wellington's outstanding debt and have only 2 days to make up the shortfall. Please don't say we are AA rated with Standard & Poor's, lest I remind you of what happened to Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers in the 2008 financial crisis, when they were also AA rated by Standard & Poor's. The taxpayer and the ratepayer will always be asked to open their collective wallets if a public servant stuffs up. I'm a businessman, and when someone comes to me and says they have a great idea, the first thing I will do is ask you, how much will it cost? The council seems to have got the basic fundamentals wrong and has instead come up with a plan that has no costings whatsoever. The fact that you are billions of dollars in debt and the fact that you can't provide any financial plan or statement to support your plan for the city, it actually sends shivers down my spine. After reading your plan and seeing the level of property purchases and the number of demolitions, rebuilds, and infrastructure upgrades, I would guess you will be talking about billions of dollars for your plan. I am completely against your proposal, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gordon. I have one question.
Yeah.
Your relationship with Paul Hill.
I was asked to stand in for Paul Hill.
Okay.
He's a chap I know.
So he's authorised you to give.
Correct.
And so what, you're reading out his views or your views?
They're his views and a number of people's views. I'm just here to represent those views.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any questions from the panel? Thank you very much for your attendance, Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on to Patricia Hart now. Welcome back, Patricia.
Hello.
Just Nicole's excusing herself from this part of the hearing after a declared potential conflict of interest. So that's the rest of the quorum will hear from you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. This talking to the submission of Urban Estates Limited, and I'm addressing primarily the matters in item 2.2 of their submission, which relate to where the focus should be for future development.
Thank you.
Urban Estates was a small local company that built houses. In recent years, they have branched out into greenfield residential development by buying properties that have the potential for future residential subdivision. These properties generally have adjoined Prebbleton and Rolleston and have been rezoned from rural to residential through private plan change requests of Urban Estates. This will result in approximately 1,200 sections, a primary school and a large retirement village being created over a 10 or so year period. They are now very familiar with taking financial risks and doing the hard work associated with greenfield residential development, including negotiating with individual landowners to achieve sufficient and well-shaped areas of land to create a quality subdivision, and understanding and working with all the specialists associated with land development, importantly, knowing how to achieve rezoning of their land. Urban Estates are concerned and disappointed that the opportunity to have a new vision of the future of Greater Christchurch has failed by avoiding provision of greenfield development areas.
To date, planning documents such as the Canterbury Regional Planning Statement and reviews of the Selwyn and Waimakariri district plans have taken very limited, if any, initiative to provide for growth. Rezoning has only resulted from requests for private plan changes and from submissions to proposed plans by developers and organisations such as whenua. These rezoning plan changes could not have occurred without the support of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and up-to-date and ground truth capacity assessments of available land and residential demand provided by applicants. In my opinion, the NPSUD has a clear purpose of overcoming the overly conservative approach that regional and district councils have adopted in recent years. In the Greater Christchurch area, this conservative approach has involved taking very limited initiatives in rezoning for future growth, and in the case of the Christchurch City Council, at times actively opposing rezoning plan changes in the Selwyn District. Had there been no rezoning of greenfield areas and residential development by private plan changes, there would have been a desperate shortage of housing and a consequential devastating increase in house prices and rents. It is very concerning then that the draft spatial plan has not provided for greenfield residential areas. While the draft plan is technically not a policy document under the Resource Management Act, it is very likely to be taken by the region and district councils as providing the basis for future planning of Greater Christchurch. It is critical then that it specifically acknowledge the need for greenfield areas and not just list the criteria for their location. Understanding this lack of additional land to meet future housing needs of Greater Christchurch, underlying this approach is what I consider a rather bizarre assumption that population growth can be accommodated by intensive housing along specified routes within the Christchurch city and a full take-up of the medium density provisions in Plan Change 14. This is simply not realistic. The second element I'm going to talk about is about the sort of centres-based approach and providing for growth. In response to the question that was provided as part of the document of whether future development investment should focus around urban centres and transport corridors, the Urban Estates Submission responds that to meet likely demand, there should be a focus on enabling density development throughout Greater Christchurch. That is not limiting it to those particular pathways. It is not critical that people live near significant urban centres, as these centres are not used on a regular basis. So I don't think they form a useful basis for determining where higher density development should be. As expressed by many submissions to this plan change, there are major concerns regarding the feasibility of providing for the future housing needs of growing populations in these limited areas, both in terms of supply and demand. And the last matter I want to talk about are the priority development areas, which were item 2.5 in my evidence. The concept of priority areas involving partnerships between councils and government agencies to unlock opportunities for development is supported in principle. However, it's unclear what the intended focus is of these areas and over what time frame they are to operate. It's also unclear whether what difference there is between priority areas and priority development areas, referred to on page 4.3 of the spatial plan. And there's unclear what the relationship is between these areas and the greenfield priority areas provided by the RPS and shown in map A. So the terminology is confusing and therefore the purpose of those priority areas.
Yes, Patricia, we've asked staff for some more clarification about that very point in a written question. So we'll get some feedback from them on that matter.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right?
Not very well. I have a bit of a hearing issue anyhow, so I just have to lean forward and
I might just lean forward to my yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to say today.
Great, thank you. Did you produce a statement that you read from?
So I'll have to redo it a bit. I've been scribbling on it.
But you have a submission, don't you?
I have a submission. It's drawn from that.
You've really covered in the submission these points. Okay, thank you. I'll see if the panel has any questions. Grant.
Thanks, Patricia, for that. I just, in terms of 2.2, you've got some bullet points there. I'm just wondering, in terms of the belief that we couldn't intensify without having a different kind of model, is your what do they call it? The Urban Estates Limited, are they primarily a single story dwelling operator, or do they have mixed use of models?
As far as I know, they've tended to be, I'm sure the majority would be single story. They may well do some stuff in within the existing city, but I'm not familiar with that, because they are builders as well as greenfield developers.
One of the bullet points here, you say assumes a ferocious appetite for smaller section sizes, and I'm just wondering, in terms of urban intensification, are you presuming that intensification would be along the lines of single story dwellings on smaller sections?
Well, certainly the medium density rules provide for that option. I think it would always be a mix if there's going to be intensification of smaller sites, but also some of the stories going up and having two more or more. It's going to be a combination, I would expect.
And do you think achieving the goals, if you like, that having going up and having different typologies rather than the sort of things that we're used to, is that something that your urban estates is potentially looking at?
I can't tell you whether they're looking at it particularly. I'm sure they would have no problem being involved in it, because I can say they are builders as well. And some of their developments in Rolleston and Prebbleton are looking. They set aside certain larger lots so that there can be multi-unit development in it, and some of that would have heights. So that's in those areas, and certainly in the town. I mean, in the city, there's no reason why that wouldn't happen, except it's the amount of how, the rate at which would happen, I guess, which would I query, that seems to have been kind of assumed in the document.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Patricia, for your submission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Lawrence Mannion here?
I haven't been able to get hold of Lawrence.
Okay.
So I think we're waiting for coming on Zoom.
Okay, that's 2:40. So I think we'll just have a short break until 2:40. Does that suit everyone? Okay, thank you very much.